Once upon a time, in a small village tucked gently among rolling green hills, there lived a humble farmer named David. The village itself seemed almost hidden from the rest of the world, protected by nature as if by divine design. Mist often clung to the hills in the early mornings, drifting lazily through fields of corn and wheat, while birdsong echoed softly through the valleys. Life here was simple, slow, and deeply connected to the land. David had lived in this village all his life. He was born in a modest stone cottage at the edge of the fields, the same cottage he now called home. Its roof was worn, its wooden door creaked with age, yet it stood firm, much like David himself. Every crack in the walls held a memory. Every patch of earth around it bore the marks of years of honest labor. From dawn to dusk, David worked his land with unwavering dedication. His hands were rough and calloused, shaped by years of plowing soil, sowing seeds, and harvesting crops beneath the sun's watchful gaze. Yet those hands were also gentle. He handled young plants with care, animals with patience, and people with kindness. Despite facing many hardships, failed harvests, harsh winters, and the quiet loneliness that sometimes comes with a simple life, David never complained. When others grumbled about fate or cursed their circumstances, David would smile softly and say, "There is always something to be thankful for." His gratitude was not loud or showy. It was woven into his daily actions, reflected in the way he treated both people and the land. The villagers admired him, not because he was wealthy or powerful, but because his presence brought a sense of peace. Children greeted him cheerfully as he passed through the village paths. Neighbors trusted him with their worries, knowing he would listen without judgment. Even the village animals seemed drawn to him, following him curiously as he worked his fields. One bright morning, as sunlight spilled generously over the hills and dew sparkled on the leaves, David set out to tend his crops as he always did. The corn stood tall and green, whispering softly as the breeze moved through the rows. David moved steadily between them, inspecting the soil, adjusting a crooked stalk here, pulling a stubborn weed there. It was then that something unusual caught his eye. Amidst the familiar greens and browns of the field, a faint shimmer flickered, subtle yet unmistakable. At first, David thought it might be a trick of the light, perhaps dew reflecting the sun in an odd way. But as he stepped closer, the shimmer grew clearer. Nestled carefully between the rows of corn lay a small wooden box. David paused, his heart beating just a little faster. Objects did not simply appear in his fields. He knelt slowly, brushing away loose soil and leaves. The box was small but finely crafted, its surface etched with intricate patterns, symbols of vines, rays of light, and shapes that felt ancient and meaningful. Time had not worn it down. Instead, it seemed preserved, as though it had been waiting. With careful hands, David lifted the box. It was surprisingly warm to the touch, as if it held a life of its own. For a moment, doubt flickered through his mind. Should he open it? Should he leave it untouched? After a deep breath, he gently opened the lid. Inside lay a golden key. It was unlike any key David had ever seen. Its surface glowed softly, not blindingly bright, but rich and warm, as if illuminated from within. The handle was beautifully shaped, adorned with delicate carvings that matched those on the box. Along the shaft of the key were engraved words, clear and unmistakable. The gift of good. David's breath caught. He stared at the key for a long moment, his thoughts racing. Why him? What did it unlock? Was it truly a gift or a test? His simple life had never included mysteries or treasures, and now one lay resting in his hands. A mixture of awe and unease filled his heart. David closed the box carefully and stood, holding it close. He knew at once that this was not something he could understand alone. There was only one person in the village wise enough to guide him, the village elder, Mr. Thomas. As David walked back through the winding paths toward the village, the hills seemed quieter than usual, as if listening. The golden key felt heavier with every step, not because of its weight, but because of the questions it carried. Little did David know that this discovery would not unlock a door of gold or riches, but something far greater. Something that would transform not only his life, but the lives of everyone he touched. David did not delay in seeking guidance. That very afternoon, he made his way to the modest home of Mr. Thomas, the village elder. Mr. Thomas had lived longer than anyone else in the village, and his wisdom was spoken of with reverence. His hair was silver white, his back slightly bent with age, yet his eyes remained sharp and calm, as though they had seen both the sorrows and miracles of life and learned peace from them. When David entered, Mr. Thomas welcomed him warmly and listened in silence as David explained everything. From the shimmering light in the cornfield to the carved wooden box and the golden key engraved with the words, "The gift of God." Carefully, David placed the key in the elder's hands. Mr. Thomas examined it for a long time. He traced the carvings with his fingers, closed his eyes briefly, and then returned the key to David. "This is indeed a gift," Mr. Thomas said gently, "but not in the way many would expect. People often believe God's blessings come in the form of wealth, power, or miracles that change life instantly. But the greatest gifts are quieter. They test the heart rather than reward the hands." David listened closely. "This key," Mr. Thomas continued, "does not open a door made of wood or stone. It opens something far more important. It reminds you of virtues: patience, kindness, humility, gratitude, and love. If you live by them, you will unlock meaning, peace, and purpose. If you chase riches instead, the key will remain useless." David felt something shift within him. He thanked Mr. Thomas and left, carrying not just the key, but a new responsibility. From that day forward, David became more mindful of how he lived. Though he had always been kind, he now practiced kindness with intention. He listened more deeply. He gave more freely. He forgave more easily. When difficulties arose, he met them with patience rather than frustration. Each act felt like turning the key within his heart, unlocking something warm and fulfilling. Days turned into weeks and weeks into months. One afternoon, as David walked through the village market, he noticed an elderly woman struggling beneath the weight of a heavy basket. Her steps were slow, her breathing labored, and people passed her by without stopping. Without a second thought, David rushed forward and lifted the basket from her arms. "Let me help you," he said kindly. Tears filled the woman's eyes, not from pain but from relief and gratitude. She invited David to her home for tea, and he accepted. As they sat together, she shared stories of her life, of love found and lost, of children grown and gone, of hardships endured and faith that carried her through. David listened, truly listened, and in that quiet exchange, he felt richer than he ever had before. As he left her home, David understood something clearly. True wealth was not gold. True power was not possession. True blessing was connection. From then on, David dedicated his life to serving others. He helped neighbors with their fields, repaired broken fences, and offered comfort to those burdened by sorrow. He volunteered at the village school, teaching children to read and write, believing that knowledge was one of the greatest gifts a person could receive. He sat with the lonely, fed the hungry, and lifted the spirits of those who had lost hope. Word of David's deeds spread throughout the village and beyond. People began to call him the living gift of God. But David never sought recognition. For him, the reward was the quiet joy he felt each time he made someone's life a little lighter. Years passed. David's hair turned gray, his steps slowed, but his heart remained strong. Even in old age, he continued to serve in whatever way he could. His presence alone became a comfort to those around him. When the time came for David to leave this world, he lay peacefully in his small cottage, surrounded by loved ones whose lives he had touched. The golden key rested beside him, not as a treasure, but as a reminder. As he closed his eyes for the final time, David smiled. He finally understood what the key truly unlocked. The gift of God was not hidden in a wooden box or forged from gold. It was found in simple acts of love, in compassion freely given, in kindness without expectation, in a life lived for others. And in that realization, David found eternal peace,